Ladies and gentlemen, I am hosting a conference this summer from the 27th to the 28th of June in my hometown of Bozeman, Montana. The conference is called NephCon and will feature discussions related to Nephilim and the pre-flood world, UFOs and the alien presence, the missing 411 phenomenon, Bigfoot, Bible prophecy, and everything in between. I will be joined by some fantastic speakers, including David Paulides from the Can-Am Missing Project and Congressman Eric Burleson, who is a member of the UAP caucus and committee that hosted both of the recent UAP hearings in Congress. This is a conference you don't want to miss. Bozeman is the gateway to Yellowstone National Park and some of the best hiking, fishing, and camping in America. So come out and join us for this epic event and enjoy the stunning beauty of Montana while you're at it. Go to alberinoevents.com and secure your tickets today. In July of 2024, a YouTube channel called Descubriendo Lugares Impresionantes published a video featuring what they claim to be a newly discovered megalithic site in the jungles of Peru. A subsequent video was published by my friends at Wandering Wolf Productions featuring more footage of the same site. The alleged megaliths were located in Capuli, a very small and somewhat remote village in the district of San Martin, not far from the provincial capital of Moyobamba. Having previously lived in this region of Peru, I was intrigued, to say the least, and decided to investigate the situation myself. Aside from my expedition to Capuli, I was also invited by Dr. Roger Zuniga to visit the University of Ica and examine the famous three-fingered tridactyl beings they have in their possession. These so-called alien mummies have garnered a considerable amount of attention in recent years, and I have hitherto refrained from commenting on them. Now that I have had the opportunity to examine some of the specimens in person, my observations and analysis of the tridactyls will be the subject of a forthcoming video. In addition to these objectives, I had also agreed to participate in a documentary film project being produced by Mike Cernovich. So to these ends, I traveled to Iquitos, Peru in March of this year and began the adventure on the Amazon River, where I took Cernovich and his film crew deep into the jungle, up the River Masan, in the same riverboat I chartered for the Face Peeler expedition, to the place where I had spent a lot of time as a young man, living with a local family in the village of Gamitana. I won't spoil the details of what we filmed up there, but suffice it to say, many of you will be very interested in the story I tell. After filming in the Amazon, Cernovich and crew decided to accompany me on my expedition to Capuli. So we made our way from Iquitos to Tarapoto, where two of my sons were born, and then to Moyobamba in the high jungle of the Andean Amazon. This is where the Amazon rainforest meets the Andes Mountains, a truly mystifying and largely unexplored landscape that undoubtedly still harbors many secrets. I have a lot of friends and acquaintances in the high jungles of Peru, so I was able to make contact with the villagers of Capuli without too much trouble. Now, if you do not speak Spanish and are unfamiliar with the territory, then it will not be so easy to find this place, as there are no roads that go to it, at least not any you can drive. The only way to get there is by foot. You have to trek up the mountain. As we approached the nearest town where we would leave our vehicles behind to ascend the path to Capuli, I noticed some interesting oddities in the landscape. 3 parallel Pyramidal Hills could be observed in close proximity to the village on the side of the mountain. We are headed up to the village of Capuli. Maybe you can see it way out there in the distance. There's some structures up there on the side of the mountain. That's Capuli. And we've come out here to investigate a new potential megalithic site. Now, I have no idea if these stones are megalithic yet. In other words, if they're artificially devised or if they're naturally occurring, if they're just natural features of the landscape. But if they are artificially devised, if they're cut stone, then we're looking at one of the most important discoveries in decades here in Peru, because these are massive stones. This could be a quarry, and if it is, it indicates that there's a city, a megalithic city somewhere in these mountains. And right away we're noticing some interesting features in the landscape. You probably can't make it out on the cell phone footage here, but against the mountain there, you have these three pyramidal shapes, these three pyramidal hills. And they look odd, they look out of place. And I mean, one could imagine perhaps those being step pyramids, or it could just be totally natural features of the landscape. We don't know, but we're eager to get up there. We're gonna have to go over to the next village, park our vehicles, and then hike for 40 minutes to Capuli. It's not my pack. As I ascended the path to Capuli, I was immediately impressed by how well constructed it was. It seemed to me that this was no ordinary footpath made by the modern inhabitants of the village. Rather, this was an ancient road built either by the Inca or a pre-Inca civilization in the distant past. And those who are familiar with well-built ancient roads in Peru will know that they always lead to somewhere important, such as citadels, cities, and sacred sites called huacas. It is interesting to note that the megaliths of Capuli are located along this ancient road. So we finally arrived to the village of Capuli. This is Capuli here. We gained some altitude. And this is a very mysterious forest here. It's not a cloud forest, but because we're at a higher elevation here, you get a lot of cloud cover in these mountains, especially in the rainy season. But that's the village of Capuli up there. We're gonna go talk to the villagers, and I wanna ask them about the path first and foremost. And then I'm eager to look at these potential megalithic stones. When I arrived in the village and conversed with its inhabitants, my suspicions about the road were confirmed. They told me that, although they maintained the road, they believed it was originally constructed a long time ago by the ancient Chachapoyas people. Ahí están, mira. Look, there's the stones.
That's it.
So,
I'm still recording you, so talk when you want to.
well, now we need to see if we can determine if they're cut or if they're naturally occurring. We're going to talk to the villagers here first. Buenas. Hola. Me llamo Timoteo. Hola, hijitos. Hemos venido a inspeccionar las piedras que tienen su puerta. So he's saying that the Chachas used to live up here. Those are the Indians from Chachapoyas. Interestingly, if you go to Chachapoyas, you're going to find a breed of Indians there that are taller. Some of them have clear eyes, blue eyes, and red hair. And in Chachapoyas, there's legends of giants in Chachapoyas. So it's interesting to me that that the villagers think that the Chachapoyan people built that path. Oh, see? Okay. So there are ruins of the Chachapoyan people up there. And there's been an archaeologist that's come up there and inspected those ruins. So this area was inhabited by the Chachapoyan people. ¿Podemos pasar a inspeccionar las ruinas? ¿Ustedes creen que esos son artificiales? O sea, no son naturales.
Claro.
¿Son cortadas?
Sí, yo soy de esa idea de que son artificiales, son trabajadas las piedras.
Trabajadas. After conferring with the owner of the property, I began my survey of the so-called Capuli megaliths. This is a big stone. This is a huge stone. The stones are impressively large and rectangular. It's easy to imagine how someone approaching this site might be immediately inclined to think that these are megalithic building blocks. At first glance, some of the edges appear to be remarkably straight, but upon closer inspection, the faces of the blocks are not as precise as they look.
It's not as straight as it looks.
Yeah, there's a few inches, not 4 inches variance here.
Yeah, it dips in a lot.
Yeah, and see, that's why you need a line, because to the eye, it looks straight, but when you really take a close look at it, it's not straight.
Good, Justin? Yep, here.
Hand me one here. This is interesting. Here's a scoop mark. I did find some 90-degree angles, which is compelling, but not ironclad proof that the blocks were cut with tools. That's pretty straight right there. You got that from this angle? Come above me, from here, over my shoulder.
Ooh. Jeez.
That's pretty straight.
That's spot on.
Right there too. That's a pretty defined edge right there, you know?
Yeah, very sharp.
Whatever kind of stone this is, I suspect sandstone, it is clearly fracturing along straight vertical lines that are visible on the surface. You can see this is a good example here of how these stones fracture vertically. So clearly a piece of this broke off, and it's probably this right here. Snapped off of the side, it leaves this nice straight face to the stone, but you can see, because it's leveled, that part of it snapped off. And the fissuring is vertical here. See this vertical fissuring? So this stone is going to break like this. It's going to break in two, and it's going to create rectangles. This is, I think, representative of how these stones are fracturing, and I think if these are megalithic blocks that have been harvested, that have been quarried, it would make sense that you would quarry them along the fracture lines. I mean, why would you cut contrary to those fractures? You would want to make it as easy as possible. And so you could break off chunks of this and you'd get rectangles because of the way that these stones fracture. I think this is another good example here. That stone may very well have been here. And you can clearly see it. There was a fracture here. I doubt this was cut. I think this is a fracture, and the stone broke off. Now, was the stone pried off to be used and carried to a construction site? I don't know, but you can see here, here's a vertical fracture forming from weathering, and this kind of fracturing is all over these stones. It's not, zigzagged. It's not random. Most of these fractures are vertical. So when you get vertical fracturing in stones, I'm not a geologist, but I think it's evident when you get vertical fracturing in stones, you're going to get rectangular chunks breaking off. Logic dictates that if the site is a megalithic quarry, then we should expect to find an edifice which incorporates these immense rectangular blocks somewhere in that region of the Andean Amazon. If such an edifice is found, then it would certainly be the largest megalithic construction ever discovered in Peru, and indeed one of the largest anywhere in the world, rivaling even Baalbek in some respects. If this is a quarry, then it would make sense that they would cut out a rectangle, a rough-hewn rectangle, transport it to the building site, and there work the stone, dress the stone, and prepare it for fitting in the edifice. So the question is, are these megaliths? And is there a lost megalithic city somewhere in the vicinity of these stones? Somewhere in these mountains. So, in conclusion, it is my opinion that there is presently insufficient evidence to support the assumption that the so-called Capuli megaliths are in fact quarried and cut building blocks. The stones are clearly breaking apart into rectangular pieces along the vertical fractures. This does not preclude the possibility that the blocks were being harvested for a megalithic complex, but it does militate against it. Now, having said that, I do suspect that there is a megalithic complex, and more than that, a lost city with monumental cyclopean architecture hidden somewhere in those mountains. And after completing my survey in Capuli, I traveled to a nearby cascade called Lakulka that may furnish evidence in support of my suspicion. Lakulka Cascade is located in the general vicinity of Capuli. Although a popular destination for the locals, the site is virtually unknown to the outside world. The rock face of the cascade forms a remarkable geological anomaly that gives the illusion of cut stones. In fact, the cascade is composed of layered slabs of bedrock that gradually descend into a series of pools. The pools appear to be intentionally designed to collect and control the flow of the water. I was told by the caretakers of the site that the cascade is a relatively new attraction and that the pools have not been altered since its discovery.
These guys are like, this isn't natural, our ancestors made this.
Yeah. Now let me preface what I'm about to say with a disclaimer that I am not a geologist. Notwithstanding, it seems to me that the cascade has been engineered to function as an aqueduct. That is not to say that the rock face was constructed, quite the opposite, in fact. It appears that it was deconstructed, that layers of bedrock have been removed to form a channel. It is evident that the forested banks of the channel, clearly elevated above the cascade, are also composed of the same layered bedrock. It would seem, then, that someone has laboriously removed layers of stone in order to create a specific grade in the rock face and then carved out the pools to collect the water. The pools even appear to have been designed with a locking mechanism to fill and empty them.
So it almost appears that they created keys in the aqueduct system. Like that this stone is a key, but they can control the flow of the water. If they want to drain this pool, they remove the keys and the water drain.
Assuming that this is an engineered aqueduct cascade, you may be wondering who could have built such a thing in the high jungles of Peru. Well, the Inca were certainly capable of this kind of engineering. Like the Romans in the Mediterranean, the Inca excelled at building roads and aqueducts throughout the Andes Mountains. But there's also a possibility that the aqueduct is much older than the Inca and belongs to a long-forgotten civilization of megalith builders. Regardless of who built it, the presence of an aqueduct would supply strong evidence that there is something significant waiting to be discovered in the region. Of course, this is all highly speculative, but the megaliths of Capuli and Lakulka Cascade are not the only potential clues that the high jungle is harboring a secret. During the course of my investigation, I was informed that new ruins had been recently discovered in the area. At first, I was not very interested in pursuing the story because new ruins are routinely discovered in Peru and are usually quite unimpressive. But when I saw a photo of the site taken from the Facebook page of one Professor Abraham Soto, the man who made the discovery, I became very interested indeed, because it appeared to depict a cyclopean megalithic wall. Guys, I have the best members community on the internet. I've been producing so much content for my community behind the scenes. This is where I spend most of my time. And the members of my community are incredible. If you're looking to fellowship with like-minded, kind-hearted, intelligent, inquisitive people, then look no further. The Alberino Analysis members community features a private, troll-free social media platform where you can directly interact with other members, including myself, both on your computer and with our mobile app. We are constantly engaging in live stream discussions, book club studies, and Q&A sessions, and I'm always publishing new briefings on an array of fascinating and controversial topics in the video catalog, as well as giving my members an insider's look at all of my expeditions and adventures. If you want a university-level education on all things Nephilim, the UFO phenomenon, transhumanism, and everything else unfolding in our times as we approach the end of the age, then go to the alberinoanalysis.com and become a member today. While in Moyobamba, I had the opportunity to meet with Professor Soto, who I learned was an investigative historian at the University of San Martin. We discussed the details of his recent discovery, as well as a broader project he has been conducting in the region. Professor Soto believes that he and his team have identified an important corridor between Moyobamba, Chachapoyas, and the magnificent ruined city of Gran Pahatin. Based on the network of ancient roads that traverse this corridor, like the one leading to the megaliths of Capuli, and significant archaeological evidence, such as 2 massive stone tombs that have been discovered on private property and are presently inaccessible, Soto and his team have postulated that there must be a lost city somewhere out there. Professor Soto has invited me to partner with him and his team in pursuit of this lost city. He also arranged for me to meet with a local farmer who lives near the presumed megalithic wall he recently discovered. After rendezvousing with this individual, we made our way into the jungle in search of the wall. This was definitely off the beaten path. We had to hike up a ravine through a river to get to the site. When we finally arrived, I was at once impressed with what I saw. I have studied many megalithic edifices in Peru, and this wall, although cruder in its construction, seems to be consistent with the polygonal cyclopean style represented at sites like Sacsayhuaman and the foundations of Machu Picchu. But in contrast to those walls, this wall was not monumental. In other words, it seems to be entirely utilitarian without having that polished, ornamental finish on the blocks. My first impression is that this edifice is a retainer wall intended to hold back the side of the ravine from collapsing into the river. In fact, a channel has been carved into the bedrock of the river directly in front of the wall, supporting the idea that someone wanted to make sure that this part of the watercourse was not obstructed. Now, it should be noted that around the corner, a little further up the river, there is a small modern dam that has been installed to collect and divert water through a series of irrigation pipes that run through the ravine and across the wall. You can clearly see the pipes in the photos. The dam was likely built by local farmers who had no particular interest in the wall and almost certainly did not understand its significance. So obviously this site is known to the locals, but was first discovered as being archaeologically significant by Professor Soto. Some of you may be familiar with my field analysis of Sage Wall, the most famous site featured in the so-called Montana Megaliths. If you haven't seen that video, I encourage you to go and watch it on my channel. One of the primary reasons why I remain unconvinced that Sage Wall is a genuine man-made megalith is because the presumed blocks of the wall do not follow through to the back side, which means they're not blocks at all, but likely the result of natural fissuring. So, whenever I'm confronted with a potential wall, the first thing I want to do is to confirm that the blocks are actually blocks and not merely fissures in the face of the stone. I can confidently report that the blocks in this wall go all the way through, as I was able to trace their seams with my machete.
Yeah, that's 100% a block.
This is a block.
Yep.
You see it right here. Follows the contour all the way to the left.
So, based on my preliminary examination of the site, this is an authentic megalithic wall constructed in the Cyclopean style, which lends support to the theory that there is an important and perhaps megalithic lost city somewhere within the corridor identified by Professor Soto and his team. As a final thought, I want to highlight two facts about this region of the Andean Amazon. First, the Inca did have a presence here. It is well known that the Inca prosecuted a campaign of conquest against the local inhabitants and established outposts in the region. In fact, it was the Sapa Inca Tupac Yupanqui who finally subdued the mighty Chachapoyas people in the 1470s. And this is the second point we should take note of. Aside from being one of the most indomitable enemies of the Inca, the Chachapoyas were also one of the most mysterious cultures in the Americas. Even today, many of the Chachapoyas people are distinguished by anomalous physical features, such as fair skin, clear eyes, and red and blonde hair. Legend has it that these people were descended from the fabled red-haired giants who once inhabited the cloud forest. And if you ask them today who the descendants were, this is what some of them will tell you. So, considering all of this, I think it is not beyond the pale to venture the question, could there be a megalithic lost city of giants hidden somewhere out there in the largely unexplored high jungle of the Andean Amazon? Time will tell. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my members community at the alberinoanalysis.com, where we are continually exploring these kinds of mysteries together.